A second Starfield DLC is almost assumed at this point, but the latest development could point to something more. And you might be asking, well, why is a second DLC assumed? Well, it was heavily implied by Todd Howard in an interview with Maddie Plays. If you didn't catch that interview, it was pretty clear that they want this game to go beyond where it is right now and even beyond Shattered Space. Also, with respect to Shattered Space, it has regularly been referred to as the first DLC for Starfield, and now a brand new trademark for something called Starborn has been discovered, and to many this is practically serving as confirmation for another DLC beyond Shattered Space. But as I said, it could be something more. There are more remarks from Todd Howard that make me think that. He said a lot of things that I want to look at based on what they want for Starfield in the future. And just in the lore of Starfield itself, the Starborn play a particularly unique role. There's also some other things to consider. How this could actually end up just being a DLC is one thing to look at, but also it could be a more ongoing role for not just Starfield, but the franchise. Anybody familiar with Bethesda property knows they have the Elder Scrolls Online, they have Fallout 76, and they are still plugging along. So there could be a larger role played by Starborn, both within the game and the lore of Starfield, but also as it pertains to this trademark that they just filed for. They could have something more in store for the game than just, hey, here's some more content. So let's consider everything. Now, every weekday here on Reforge Gaming, I tell you what I think about a gaming topic, and then we go to a live stream where I want to know what you think. So if you like this content and want more like it, please remember to like and subscribe. The first and most likely possibility is that we're looking at the beginning of a second DLC, and when it comes to the Starborn in the game of Starfield, the lore is sparse, but we have some great clues into what the DLC could focus on. If you pull directly from the Starfield wiki, it says this: the Starborn are a group of enigmatic beings who reveal themselves to Constellation after the spacefarer collects enough artifacts. Initially speculated to be extraterrestrial or even supernatural, they are in fact humans who have passed through the Unity, a portal which allows for travel between universes. Now, that last part's very important because they actually use that with respect to how New Game Plus works in the game. If you haven't yet rolled over, this is going to be a pretty major spoiler, okay? But Rock, Paper, Shotgun explained it very succinctly for us. They say the following: at the end of Starfield's story, you eventually find your way to and use the Unity. This causes you to travel to a new universe, slightly altered to that of your original Starfield playthrough. Through this process, you become a Starborn, granting you the Starborn ship and Starborn armor that we explained above. So they basically walked through how you could find and get those items. Now, this could end up just being one of the ways that they tie to a DLC, but before I get to that, there is one more piece from the official wiki that is worthy of note. Quote, the Starborn are equipped with spacesuits of unique design and pilot highly advanced single-occupant starships known as Guardians. The origins of their technology is unknown. So, naming a DLC Starborn could be all about investigating their technology in order to see, look, is there something beyond the Starborn? Where did they get this tech? Did somebody give it to them? You would basically be doing sort of an investigation. Also, the end of the game gives you a choice about how you should interact with two different Starborn. That could play a huge role in the DLC as well. PC Gamer explained it this way: you actually choose between the emissary and the hunter, and this is what they said. As you might expect, siding with one Starborn over the other leads to one becoming your enemy at the close of the main questline. The emissary wants to keep the Unity safe from those it deems unworthy of using it, whereas the hunter thinks it should be a free-for-all. If someone is powerful enough to claim it, then might makes right. You can also choose to side with neither of them, which means they'll both become your enemy. So I'm not sure if they would create a DLC that would require you to beat the entire game, okay? Because Currently, we don't have details on how Shattered Space is going to work. Like, are you going to need to complete the entire campaign? It would seem maybe to be a little contained if you look at Shattered Space. It's like this contained sort of separate thing. So I don't think Shattered Space is going to require you to have played through the entire game. But if they do a DLC titled Starborn, they might want to have you progress through the story either far enough to have encountered them or something else entirely. So I see three possibilities here. First, you would basically explore and discover more about the Starborn themselves. Like, this could include new locations, new technology, new abilities, new weapons, because clearly they have something that we're not yet getting to use. You can use the Unity and get the armor and the ship, but there could be so much more with respect to weaponry and storytelling. Now, you could have this sort of mysterious group that, you know, they're harnessing this power, they're protectful of the technology. It's a really good setup for storytelling. There could be something further beyond it. Maybe there's a species even more powerful than them. Now, a second possibility is that this ties to your choice at the end of the game in some way. Now, this would obviously then require you to do a complete playthrough of the game, but it could be cool to see a DLC do that, sort of playing off the decision that you make at the end of the base game experience. This is one, I think, of the least likely, though, because I think you would want as many people to experience the DLC as possible, and requiring that complete playthrough may work against that. Now, the third and final possibility is that it is tied to New Game Plus in some way. This again could work against lots of people buying and enjoying the Starborn DLC, but the way New Game Plus functions, it actually really got me thinking. The Starborn are the catalyst to engaging with Starfield in an ongoing way, so that could point to something more than just a DLC. In my previous coverage of Starfield, I argued that the game was just getting started. I could see all the improvements, the updates, the patches, really giving them a runway to having what I called sort of a cyberpunk moment. But I've also argued that Starfield would be perfect for an online experience. Starfield Online is just sort of a placeholder name in my mind, but I could see something like that coming to fruition. It would not be inside the current game of Starfield, something like Elder Scrolls Online or Fallout 76. And interestingly enough, when I covered and I watched through the Maddie Plays interview with Todd Howard, I picked up on something. Earlier in the interview, Todd expressed that he wished they had supported games like Skyrim and Fallout 4 for longer than they did. And he said that going into Starfield, they were thinking the same as they did for Fallout 76, and that they will support the game for as long as they can. He said that, quote, "You have to start out by thinking about a 10-year horizon." Now, I found that part particularly interesting. Not only did he express that they wish they had supported Skyrim and Fallout 4 for longer, but he said that Fallout 76 was the thinking that they mirrored when they were thinking about supporting Starfield. Now, that doesn't mean that Starfield's going to turn into a game like Fallout 76, but it does mean that Fallout 76 was the catalyst into having sort of this 10-year horizon for the game of Starfield. Well, what better way to do that than to not just have ongoing DLC or extra content that you're adding, but an ongoing game? What if Starfield Starborn is a separate game, an online game that allows you to create a Starborn, and then you do exactly what the lore says they do? You get to travel to new universes. That sounds like the perfect setup for an ongoing online version of Starfield to me. The way they set up New Game Plus in the base game of Starfield could have been what spurred on this idea, if my theory is correct. They could say, hey, we're creating a pretty cool piece of lore that allows for ongoing engagement with the universe of Starfield, and it's making everything different each time. This could dovetail perfectly with seasonal content like they do in Diablo or No Man's Sky. You would create a seasonal Starborn, you would have themes, missions, rewards, and other seasonal aspects, and then next season, you just do it all over again. The lore around Starborn allows for traveling to new universes, so every season could be a brand new universe. You could have new rules, New species, new weapons, new stories. Just change everything. Change the rules of gravity. Change all the weapon types. Have modifiers. You could even have some version of this maybe just baked into the base game of Starfield. As I said, they might be able to tie this with how they do New Game Plus. They could introduce seasons into the game with the Starborn lore and the ability to travel to new universes. Now, I know people get very cautious. They hear seasons, they're like, oh no, I don't want this to be some live service game with a battle pass. What I'm basically saying is I could see them using this as a way to have seasonal themes and things happening in the game, not necessarily turning into something sort of chintzy or battle pass driven. They could essentially expand on their original idea and their original function of New Game Plus. You just redo it all again in a slightly different universe. What I'm saying they could do with an online version, though, is something that is more ongoing in its format, playing with other people, having very clear thematic changes every single time a new season starts. So, with all of that considered, what do I think they end up doing with Starfield Starborn? If I were a betting man, I would put my chips on the table and say that this is likely just a DLC. But tying it to the Starborn makes me think we may end up with some approximation of one of my theories. And there are a lot of reasons to think that this is possibly more than just a DLC. We have Todd Howard's own remarks in multiple different places about how he views this game and what they would like to do with it, especially when he starts talking about a 10-year horizon and that they started thinking about Starfield in the way they thought about Fallout 76. There's also their plans for Starfield. It's very clear this was not just some one-off game. They're doing all of these updates. Now, they did promise an update like every 6 weeks, and Todd Howard recently said that's not going to be a rigid thing that they feel like they can keep to. Some are going to be closer together, more spread out. Some are going to be more substantive than others. I think that's totally fine. I thought the update every 6 weeks was a little bit ambitious, but you can see that's emanating from, I think, an internal vision for what they want to see happen with Starfield. There's also the Elder Scrolls Online and Fallout 76, undeniable ongoing live service formats with franchises that already existed in the Elder Scrolls and Fallout. There's also just the lore surrounding the Starborn. It's perfect for an ongoing format. It actually, I think, is a brilliant way to not just do New Game Plus, but to take your game and to always shake things up a bit. We know that games typically, when they do an ongoing format, there's always that question of, well, how do we reset the player? How do we give them new things to go and seek out? Well, going into this, you would know, hey, I'm a Starborn, and something that I do on a regular basis is I go to new universes. And you could bring your gear with you, you could bring your ship with you, but there'd be brand new things to go and see and experience, which would mean you'd want the new loot, you'd want the new stuff. I've talked about contextual power in other live service conversations. Basically, the idea of you give people new loot that's stronger or better in that new context. Well, what better new context than a brand new universe? And the way that Starborn functions within the New Game Plus of Starfield, I just think really points to an ongoing mentality for how that lore will function. Either way you shake it, the Starborn seemed like a great way to give Starfield a reason to go on for a very long time. But those are just my thoughts, and now it's time to hear your thoughts. And you can do that in a comment below, or you can come to the live stream that follows this upload. It'll be in a pinned comment below. It also hits the card that hits right here. And if you like this content and you want more like it, please remember to like, share, and subscribe.